Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, everybody's favorite Lakehouse and AI guy. And basically what I want to do is talk about just some thoughts on things. Just talk about where it seems like things are going, sort of like what are the sort of interesting things to follow, at least in my mind. The first thing is just kind of seeing first just sort of the advent of local models and sort of like where local models are going. So if you're not familiar with like the latest like 27 billion parameter Qwen model, is a model that you can run on a fairly decent laptop. And that's pretty fascinating because it's pretty much like the equivalent around like a Claude 4.6, 4.8 type quality. So, I mean, basically what was sort of the frontier of AI just a year ago is now something you can run on your laptop and get all the benefits of that. Now, again, it would be maybe not the smoothest, greatest experience, but again, that's just in the last year. So imagine like a year from now, the quality and size of local models that will exist. Okay, if innovation just keeps kind of going in the direction that's going, to the point where we can have sort of like this sort of frontier level technology be efficient enough and small enough to run on stock laptops. And again, for the vast majority of use cases, productivity, things like that, that's going to be plenty of power. Okay, not everyone's trying to code the next giant tech system or do some sort of breakthrough in research. You know, they want to create a document, they want to just build a website, or build a small little browser game. And for that kind of stuff, like this would be more than powerful enough for it, and you'll be able to run it on stock hardware. But then there's also things like Gemma 4, which is a local model that could probably run on your phone at certain versions of it. And that makes it possible where basically in the future, the kind of just intelligence that your phone can operate with without having to be connected to the internet, it's gonna be pretty amazing that a lot of productivity could be done from the phone, okay? You design a phone that has sort of the proper toolings and are basically a phone specific harness around a model like Gemma 4, and you create a phone that really sort of built around that experience. You can create, I imagine you're gonna start seeing some variations on that kind of a experience. Which is really, really, really cool. So the small models. The second is just like the evolution of the harnesses. So basically, again, the first harness was really like, let's say Claude Code, as far as like these sort of agentic harnesses. And then things kind of evolved from there for different CLI tools, different desktop apps. And now you're moving away from just like the form of the harness to the interface between you and the agents. Because again, we also kind of first was used to sort of these chat interfaces where you had like individual chats and each chat was its own session to this sort of bot-like interface. So again, when you think of Grokbot, Buzz, and some of these other things where basically instead of having different chats on different subjects, you have different bots or agents who are different types of experts and have different roles, and you maintain a continuous conversation about their particular task, their particular role, and even have them even communicate with each other as a team. Okay, I just finally got my hands on Grokbot this morning, and it's cool. It's cool. Like, again, the price has gotten a little bit cheaper. Before it was like a $300 entry point. Now it's like a $100 entry point, which is still expensive, $100 a month. I mean, to be fair, that also gets you access to Grok and Grok Imagine and Grok Build. But again, chances are, I imagine most people, if they have to choose between spending $100 a month on a ChatGPT or Claude subscription versus Grok, they're probably going to choose the Claude or ChatGPT subscription. Although Grokbot is pretty cool, and at a $100 entry point, along with the other things you get, it can be compelling to the right person. And so far, I'm enjoying my experience with it so far. Basically what I did is just kind of create like a little brand team that kind of helps me manage my brand and monitor the things that I need to monitor as far as like, hey, where can I go speak? What are some blog ideas? What are the trends? These kind of things. And then they work as a team to kind of bring me a weekly report regarding all this. Not a daily report, just because again, it is using up credits, so you don't want to like burn through your credit allowance too quick, and it does burn it much quicker than just normal Grok usage. But of course, you can get the same environment for free. I have Hermes, and Hermes now has a bot mode and a lot of other, there's Buzz, which is also free, and I have that set up. Now, the reason why I am taking Grok for a full spin is just kind of see like, hey, is there value in having sort of like these bots that have a separate computer? So right now I have all sorts of agents running on my personal laptop, and that's all fun and well. But I mean, you have enough of them running, they're using up my computer's resources, doing all sorts of cool tasks. Is there a value in just having sort of a team that's agnostic of my computer's particular power and resource availability? So we'll see. Okay, like I did try that out once when I signed up for like Perplexity Computer. I just found like a lot of these agents were just much more useful on the computer where all my stuff is at. So I'm, maybe not doing the most robust sandboxing and isolation, but honestly, not doing so is what's made it particularly useful for me. Although again, I do have everything sort of, there's nothing particularly sensitive, and there's a particular, all the work that I do is in a particular part of my laptop. So there is some level of isolation, but the grander point is that these harnesses are evolving, and the harnesses are becoming a much bigger part of how I interface with a lot of these things. Like oftentimes I'll switch out the model and I still feel different than when I'm using Hermes, and now I actually also started using OpenClaw as well. And it just feels different regardless of which model I put in there, because of the work that's put into the harness and creating having the harness kind of take any model and give it a sort of unified feel. Okay, for example, people who will alter Claude Code to be able to use their ChatGPT subscription or vice versa, similar concept. So the harnesses are really becoming a bigger part of what determines your experience with your tool. So again, in the future, theoretically, I could be running that Qwen model locally on my computer, and then still using a Hermes or OpenClaw as the harness by which I interact with the model, and just keep my day-to-day experience very similar to what it is now. One difference is that if I'm running that Qwen model on my local laptop, I'm going to be pushing that local laptop a little bit harder than I am now. Although I think my laptop might have the resources to be able to run that model. Although I've had the laptop for a while, so I'm not eager to wear out its resources. So those are two sort of interesting trends. So again, the trend of like these local models that make it more and more feasible to do most of what most people need to do without necessarily having to have a subscription or an internet connection. There's also the advent of cheaper models. When you take a look at DeepSeek, which DeepSeek is a model that can be run locally, you do need probably not your stock laptop, but if you're one of these people who buy these like AI specific computers like the DGX Sparks, you could probably run a DeepSeek, I think, on like 2 DGX Sparks. And then that's a really powerful model for that you could be running for free, but also just paying for, honestly, you pay for like the amount you would probably spend just on a subscription, even with the increased prices for DeepSeek, the amount you probably on average spend, you would take several years for a DGX Spark to really return its investment. That's why I haven't been interested in buying one of those sort of local AI computers. I do see the local AI becoming better and better, that maybe eventually I can run it pretty well on laptops like the one I have, which I theoretically can with Qwen. And then also like when you have things like DeepSeek that are just fairly affordable, just subscription based, like I'll struggle to spend $1 putting it through its paces like in a day. So that is pretty cool. Yeah, so there's that. And then also just again the form. So like again, graphs, the bots, a lot of the way we think about how we structure our agentic jobs. So that's pretty interesting. But again, the things that'll be becoming part of the conversation again as you start thinking at enterprise level agentic AI is like the knowledge graph side of things. Like how do you put all the data that an enterprise has and stitch it together in a way that is useful for the harness? These are all interesting questions. I do have a lot to say in that particular manner, but I'll save it out for a little bit later on, because what I want to do is I want to see the Apache Aussie project evolve a little bit more before I start being too verbose on my thoughts on there. But I do think that's a big piece of the puzzle. Polaris and Aussie is sort of the open source bearers of enterprise-wide context. And that's part of why I built the Loro harness that basically has a first-class Apache Polaris support. So that way, theoretically, it could be a harness that you could either use directly in the CLI or use or build an interface around. It actually has an interface now, a web interface now, but theoretically, you can connect a Apache Polaris with your company Lakehouse, and it can have access to that context and also use that as an extension to its memory. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on as far as just trying to, these things advancing, but they're also just advancements in making it practical for people to use it in day-to-day productivity. I think Google's been the best at this. So like ChatGPT has a lot of really cool features, and Claude has a lot of great features. they really try to push on the edges of what power users do oftentimes. I find Google's been the best and the way they've integrated Gemini into like using Google Docs or Google Sheets or Google Slides to integrate, Gemini in a very way that's easy to use and very useful. And I find it very useful for a lot of things that I do as someone who generally daily drives Google's productivity suite. I haven't played as much with Copilot and Microsoft yet. So it might be of equal quality, but so far I do, my experience so far has been most positive with Gemini as far as like, okay, hey, which one's serving my daily productivity needs at the work level. And now when it comes to generally everything else I do, outside of just like, hey, writing a document or putting together a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint, then I have a lot of fun with, Claude Code, ChatGPT, and then with all these other harnesses that I play with and models that I experiment with. But I feel like Google's, despite, some of the criticism that people like to give Google, especially lately in the AI space, they've done the best job of making AI accessible to the everyday person who isn't anxious to go sign up for a ChatGPT subscription, but probably has a Gmail account, and put it in a way that they'll just inherently end up using it more and more in their daily life. And I think they've started to back off on some of the stuff where they're making this search to AI a little bit, which, again, has consequences with like content creators, stuff like that. So I feel good that they're doing that. But overall, yeah, I feel like Google's is very underestimated. And I mean, Gemini 3.7, if you haven't played with it, is 3.7 Flash. It's a pretty good Flash model. Again, it's a Flash model. It's not supposed to be the forefront of intelligence, but it's fast. It's affordable, especially when you think about like, hey, who has like a affordable enterprise story, and it works very well within a lot of these tools, within the harnesses they built for each of the individual tools within the Google enterprise. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Hopefully you guys enjoyed them. I'll see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.